Few names in music history are wrapped in as much mystery, brilliance, and heartbreak as Billie Holiday. But while the world applauded Lady Day for her groundbreaking performances and defiant spirit, few realized just how dark and devastating her private life had become. What happened to all her fame, her fortune, her power? How did one of the most influential voices in jazz history end up with just 70 cents in her bank account and $750 in cash taped to her leg? And what role did the U.S. government and those closest to her really play in her downfall? The answers reveal not just the unraveling of a legend, but the systemic forces that tried to silence her. You won't believe how far the story of Billie Holiday really goes. Here's how much Billie Holiday was worth when she died. For anyone who loves music, or simply powerful human stories, The United States versus Billie Holiday is an essential watch. The film reintroduces the world to one of the most complex and groundbreaking artists of all time, brought to life by singer Andra Day in a performance that's both haunting and unforgettable. Discovered by Stevie Wonder's wife, Day didn't just act, she transformed. Her commitment to the role was so deep, she adopted Holiday's gravelly tone and presence in a way that stunned critics and earned her widespread acclaim. But it's not just the cast that draws attention. It's the woman at the center of it all. Billie Holiday's real story is filled with so much pain, passion, and injustice. It's astonishing that it took this long for Hollywood to truly dig into it. Her life wasn't just marked by fame and music, it was defined by trauma, racism, addiction, and a relentless war with the U.S. government. Holiday wasn't born into success. She endured a childhood filled with abuse and hardship, was sexually assaulted, and ended up working in a brothel by age 13. Later, in the 1940s, she turned to heroin, starting a long and tragic battle with addiction. Through it all, her talent was undeniable. Her voice became the soul of jazz, and her songs, especially the chilling protest ballad "Strange Fruit," spoke out against injustice in a way few dared to at the time. Despite the racism she faced, being forced to use freight elevators in hotels so white guests wouldn't have to see her, Billie still rose. She toured the country, made a name for herself, and came home from performances with wads of cash stuffed in her coat pockets. But wealth was never her focus. As long as she could make her mother happy and afford a little peace in her life, that was enough. She even helped her mom open a restaurant with her earnings. Sadly, addiction never loosened its grip. Much of her money went to feeding the habit that would ultimately kill her. At just 44 years old, Billie Holiday died of heart and liver failure. And what did she leave behind? Not the fortune you'd expect from a music legend, just $750 strapped to her leg. Was that true that the government killed Billie Holiday? Her lover was a plant sent to destroy her? Let's look back at the tragic real-life story of Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday's story began in hardship. Born as Eleanora Fagan on April 7, 1915, in Philadelphia, she entered the world during a time of great social difficulty. Her parents, Clarence Holiday and Sadie Fagan, were both African-American teenagers who were not married at the time. Sadie was still a teen when she gave birth to Billie, and Clarence, who would go on to pursue his dream of becoming a jazz musician, soon left, leaving Sadie to raise their daughter on her own. Clarence's presence in Billie's life was fleeting, and while her mother tried to provide for her, the household environment was far from stable. It's important to remember that Sadie was navigating early motherhood in an incredibly challenging world, and while Billie's relationship with her mother would later become complicated, some empathy is warranted given the circumstances. Billie's childhood was marked by poverty and instability. After skipping school repeatedly, she was brought before a juvenile court at just 9 years old. On January 5, 1925, she was sent to the House of the Good Shepherd, a Catholic reform school for African-American girls. Though she returned to her mother's care after 9 months, her difficulties only deepened. By age 11, Billie had left school entirely. Around this time, she experienced a deeply traumatic event involving an older neighbor, an incident that would forever shape her. In response, she was again placed in the house of the Good Shepherd, ostensibly for her protection. However, Billie found the experience isolating and painful. At just 11 years old, Billie Holiday experienced a traumatic violation at the hands of a trusted neighbor, an event that left deep emotional scars. Although the man responsible received only a short sentence, Billie, the victim, was the one who truly bore the consequences. She was sent to the House of the Good Shepherd, a Catholic reform school for young black girls, where her time was marked more by discipline than by healing. By 1927, Billie had been released and began trying to support herself through small jobs, running errands, helping in a brothel, and doing domestic work. In 1928, her mother relocated to New York City, and Billie followed, hoping for a fresh start. But life in the city offered little reprieve. Caught in a cycle of poverty and desperation, Billie and her mother found work in a brothel, an act of survival more than choice. Their lives took a dramatic turn when the brothel was raided. Billie, still just a teenager, was arrested and convicted, ultimately serving a grueling 5-month sentence on Welfare Island. Although she was barely 14 at the time, she claimed to be 21 to avoid further scrutiny. But even amid these hardships, Billie's spirit was unbroken. Music became her refuge. With a voice that was sultry, soulful, and utterly unique, Billie began performing in smoky nightclubs. Her presence captivated audiences and set her apart in a crowded field. Still, her journey to stardom was anything but smooth. Billie had a fiery personality, and years of betrayal, mistreatment, and relentless exploitation made her cautious and uncompromising. Her time with Count Basie's orchestra ended abruptly, with rumors swirling that she was difficult. But those who truly knew the situation understood the truth. Billie simply refused to accept poor pay, harsh working conditions, and an exhausting touring schedule. She expected respect. In a daring and history-making move, Billie approached Artie Shaw, a clarinetist looking to make his mark, and proposed that he integrate his band by hiring her, a black female singer. It was a bold proposition, especially with performances planned in the deeply segregated South. Billie knew the risks and tried to keep a low profile, but the prejudice she encountered was unrelenting. She wasn't allowed to use the same entrances or elevators as her white bandmates and often faced hostility both on and off stage. Though her collaboration with Shaw broke barriers, it also came with constant challenges, record label conflicts, social isolation, and the heavy emotional toll of racism. After a particularly humiliating incident at the Lincoln Hotel, Billie made the painful decision to walk away from the band. Then came a phone call that would change her forever. Her estranged father, Clarence Holiday, had passed away alone in a segregated hospital in Texas. Despite their distance, his death devastated Billie. Denied proper care because of racial discrimination, Clarence's final moments served as a brutal reminder of the injustices Billie had fought against all her life. The pain fueled her artistry and strengthened her resolve. In the late 1930s, while signed to Columbia Records, Billie encountered a song that would become her most powerful and controversial statement. Strange Fruit, written by Abel Meeropol under the pseudonym Lewis Allen, was a haunting reflection on racial violence in America. Café Society. Café Society was no ordinary nightclub. Located in New York City, it stood out as the first fully integrated venue in the city, founded by Barney Josephson, a former shoe salesman with progressive ideals. His vision was simple but radical for the time, to create a space where people of all races could enjoy music together, free from the racial divisions so entrenched in American society. It was here, in 1939, that Billie Holiday introduced what would become one of the most powerful performances in American music history, Strange Fruit. At first, she was reluctant to sing it. The lyrics, which depicted the horrors of racial violence in the American South, were emotionally heavy and politically risky, but the song spoke to her, especially because it reminded her of her father, Clarence Holiday, and the injustice he faced near the end of his life. Despite her concerns, Holiday delivered a breathtaking performance. The audience was asked for complete silence. The lights dimmed. A single spotlight focused on her face as she began to sing. At the final note, the stage went dark, and when the lights returned, she had quietly slipped away. The crowd was left stunned and in tears. Strange Fruit was rarely played on the radio, yet it became her most requested and best-selling record. Activists embraced it, using it to draw attention to the need for anti-lynching legislation. The government, however, wasn't as supportive. Some officials saw the song's popularity, especially among sympathetic white listeners, as a threat. There are long-held beliefs that Billie was marked as a problem artist from that moment on. Despite the pressure, Strange Fruit solidified Billie's legacy. It even earned recognition from Time magazine and became a cornerstone of her career. Reflecting on her time at Cafe Society, Holiday once said it transformed her from an unknown into a star. Fame alone couldn't pay the bills, but it gave her leverage to demand more respect and better pay from those who managed her. In 1944, she returned to Commodore Records, revisiting past collaborations with Teddy Wilson and introducing new songs like I'll Be Seeing You, which reached #1, and Embraceable You, which was later inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. Strange Fruit itself was also honored in 1978, decades after she first sang it with such quiet defiance. At the same time, Billie was known throughout New York for her generosity. For years, she reportedly gave freely to those in need, feeding the hungry and handing out money without hesitation. But her heart remained closest to her mother, Sadie, whom she affectionately called the Duchess. With her earnings, Billie helped her mother open a restaurant named Mom Holidays. The spot quickly became a hub for jazz musicians and nightlife regulars, even attracting Count Basie's band members after hours. Yet the warm relationship between mother and daughter didn't last. As Billie's financial struggles increased, she turned to the restaurant, her own investment, for help. Her mother refused. Their argument escalated, and in frustration, Billie stormed out, shouting the line that would inspire one of her most famous songs, "God bless the child that's got his own." The 1941 track sold over 1 million copies and remains one of her most enduring hits. Then came another blow. In 1945, Sadie passed away. Billie spiraled emotionally, and though she landed a role in the Hollywood film New Orleans with Louis Armstrong, her personal struggles began to take center stage. By 1947, even at the peak of her success, earning over $250,000 across just 3 years, her life was unraveling. On May 16, 1947, Holiday was arrested on narcotics-related charges. Alone in court, her attorney declined to defend her. Weak and unwell, Billie pleaded guilty, hoping to be placed in a hospital. Instead, she was sentenced to serve time at the Alderson Federal Prison Camp in West Virginia. The conviction cost her more than her freedom. In New York, she lost her cabaret card, which meant she could no longer perform in nightclubs that served alcohol, drastically limiting her opportunities and income. Upon her release in March 1948, Billie was greeted by her pianist and her dog, Mr. Though the public still adored her, she feared they had turned their backs on her. Her comeback performance at Carnegie Hall was a triumph, breaking records for ticket sales. But the relentless need to tour, to make a living, pushed her toward another relapse. Her personal life became chaotic again, marked by brawls, exhaustion, and yet another arrest in 1949. But why was Billie Holiday such a target for the authorities when other stars were also involved with substances, especially white stars? Enter Harry Anslinger, the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. He had a particular disdain for Billie Holiday, and it all boiled down to her iconic song, Strange Fruit. He made it his mission to go after Holiday and other black jazz musicians, particularly because their music was not only revolutionary, but also politically charged, speaking out against the racial climate of the time and pushing for change. His actions were driven by deep-rooted racial prejudice. While other white artists like Judy Garland faced similar challenges with addiction, Anslinger took a very different approach. He actually advised Garland to rest and went so far as to reassure her studio that she wasn't an addict, offering her protection and secrecy. On the other hand, Holiday, who was struggling with her own personal demons, faced harsh treatment. Despite being severely dehydrated, Holiday was denied hospitalization and instead was sent to jail, highlighting the stark contrast in how black musicians, especially Holiday, were treated compared to their white counterparts. Even though Anslinger's shadow loomed over her career, Billie fought tooth and nail to keep her music alive, showing resilience and unmatched talent despite facing systemic injustice and her own battles. But now let's shift gears and talk about her relationships, which played a significant role in her tumultuous life. Amid the golden age of jazz, Billie's life was marked by heartbreak, love, and betrayal, much of it playing out in the public eye. Her journey through matrimony was a series of unfortunate events, starting with her first marriage to James Monroe in 1941. Monroe, much like her other partners, introduced Billie to substances, and their toxic relationship only worsened over time with excessive drinking and other vices. This was a turbulent period in Billie's life, and although she and Monroe eventually divorced, the damage had been done, and addiction took root in her life. The cycle of toxic relationships continued when she married Joe Guy in 1951, but their marriage was short-lived. It wasn't until 1957 that Billie's third marriage came to be, to Louis McKay, after they were both arrested for narcotics in 1956. McKay initially appeared to be a stabilizing force, someone who could help her kick her addiction. However, it didn't take long for the truth to emerge. McKay, working as a mob enforcer, was a cruel and controlling man who exerted both physical and psychological abuse on Billie. His influence was so intense that Billie often had to tape up her ribs just to perform. Behind closed doors, McKay's ambitions stretched far beyond his personal life with Billie. He made plans to ensure that if she were to die, he would profit from her legacy. Little did Billie know, McKay was secretly working with Harry Anslinger, a federal agent with a vendetta against her. Anslinger, infamous for his role in the war on substances, specifically targeted Billie Holiday, seeing her as a symbol of the jazz culture he despised. McKay's connection to Anslinger marked the ultimate betrayal, a deceitful scheme designed not only to control Holiday, but to break her down. Many people believe that McKay, due to his ties to the mob, may have worked out a deal to avoid jail time in exchange for his involvement with Billie. He probably had leverage over him, making him complicit in this malicious plan. Though McKay never truly loved Billie, he used her vulnerabilities to his advantage. He stayed clear-headed, choosing not to partake in the substances that plagued her, but instead encouraged her to continue using them. His cruelty extended beyond emotional manipulation. He physically mistreated her. Even while he had his own affairs, Billie stayed with him, unaware of the full extent of his betrayal. He was secretly working with Anslinger, a partnership that only furthered his deceit. McKay even took advantage of Billie's money, buying properties in his name alone while taking control of her assets. In many ways, he acted like a Judas in her life. In 1956, struggling with depression and a desire to shield herself from the overwhelming public scrutiny, Billie released her autobiography, Lady Sings the Blues, accompanied by an album of the same name. Yet, in her final days, she was consumed by paranoia, convinced that government agents were after her. Tragically, her fears proved to be true. While she was hospitalized and vulnerable, federal agents stormed her room, falsely accusing her of possession. Even as she lay dying, they were relentless. and Billie's spirit began to break under the weight of her indictment. In her final days, she was handcuffed to her hospital bed and watched by police. Her methadone treatment, which had been helping her stay sober, was abruptly stopped by authorities under Anslinger's influence. This cruel action sealed her fate. After months of suffering, Billie Holiday passed away from complications related to cirrhosis at just 44 years old. Her life, filled with immense talent and beauty, ended in sorrow and pain, leaving a tragic mark on the music world. After Billie Holiday's passing, her estranged husband, Louis McKay, emerged not as a grieving widower, but as a cold opportunist. With Billie's bank account nearly drained due to McKay's lavish spending, he took control of her funeral arrangements. Despite a generous offer from a wealthy fan to have Billie buried in a prestigious Manhattan cemetery, McKay chose to bury her in a simple, unmarked plot of land next to her mother. There was no tombstone, no marker, just a patch of earth. The jazz community was appalled, condemning those who had profited from Billie's talent, yet allowed her to be laid to rest without dignity. Eventually, public pressure forced McKay to relent, and he agreed to place a shared tombstone for Billie and her mother, Sadie. It was a small gesture, but far too little, too late, for a woman who had given so much to the world and received so little in return. His decision to bury Billie next to her mother, despite their strained relationship, seemed like a final bitter act, a last goodbye that Billie never got to say to her mother. In the later years of her life, Billie Holiday faced a series of overwhelming challenges. Penniless, battling depression, and tragically undervalued by the very industry she had shaped. However, as time passed, the world began to recognize and celebrate the raw talent and beauty of her music. Fans and critics alike, who might have overlooked her during her lifetime, started to give her the credit she deserved. Hall of Fame inductions and statues were erected in her honor, and her voice, once relegated to the margins of jazz history, took center stage, cementing her place as one of the most iconic and, at times, controversial figures in the genre. Billie's life was a complex tapestry of truths, half-truths, and outright fabrications. One such story that continued to shadow her legacy was her arrest for possession, which was linked to Jimmy Fletcher, an undercover agent who had been tasked with monitoring her. In the movies, Fletcher is often portrayed romantically, but in reality he was sent to cause chaos in her life. He later expressed deep remorse for his role in her mistreatment and the agency's actions. In one particularly demeaning incident, when the authorities raided Billie's home, they demanded that a female officer strip search her. Billie, refusing to wait for the female officer, began disrobing herself and even urinated on the floor as a defiant act against their harassment. Fletcher later admitted to feeling guilty for how the agency treated her, but by then it was far too late. Despite the damage done, some redemption came through Billie's publication of Lady Sings the Blues in 1956. The book stirred up a storm of controversy due to its sensational recounting of her life, with many romanticized details about her relationships. The book even prompted legal threats from Hollywood, further highlighting the turbulent and challenging life she led. Several figures threatened legal action over Billie's memoir. However, one celebrity went even further, vowing to shut down the entire publishing house in outrage. One of the most explosive revelations from Billie's book was her passionate and complex relationship with the legendary actress Tallulah Bankhead. According to those close to Billie, Tallulah was completely infatuated, almost obsessively so, with Billie Holiday. Yet Tallulah insisted on keeping their relationship private. As a black woman who also had relationships with women and men, both aspects were considered taboo at the time. She was adamant that Billie not discuss it. In contrast, Billie, seemingly unconcerned with societal norms, was prepared to detail their affair in her book, as she had indeed loved and been intimate with both men and women. This greatly angered Tallulah, who threatened Billie. It's worth noting that Tula had influential connections. During a critical moment when Billie was detained in 1949 and contemplated ending her life, Tallulah not only paid for a psychiatrist, but also reached out to none other than FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover on Billie's behalf, highlighting her powerful friendships. The storm of controversy surrounding the memoir angered many. However, Orson Welles, who had his own history with Billie in the 1940s, remained unfazed by his inclusion in the book. He simply didn't care what was written, as he was living his own life with Arthur Kitt. The same couldn't be said for other stars who were upset and wanted Billie silenced because she was prepared to reveal too much. Consequently, lawyers and her co-writer had to remove significant portions from the book to avoid potential scandals. In the last days of her life, Billie Holiday lived in Upper West Side townhouse. The iconic townhouse has recently hit the market for $13.995 million. This historic residence was home to Holiday until her death in 1959 and was where she lived during the release of her famous 1958 album, Lady in Satin. Built in the early 1900s in a Renaissance revival style, the townhouse is located near Central Park and the Reservoir, offering a prime location. Spanning over 6,300 square feet across 6 levels, the 20-foot-wide property features 7 bedrooms, 6 full bathrooms, and 2 half baths. The townhouse is filled with natural light, with spacious rooms boasting 10 to 12-foot-high ceilings, 6 fireplaces, and a wine cellar. For entertainment, the home also includes a screening room complete with a full kitchen and bar, as well as a skylight. Kelly Killoren Benjamin of Douglas Elliman, who previously appeared on The Real Housewives of New York City and $1 Million Listing, is the listing agent. She highlights the impressive primary suite, which spans the entire 3rd floor and measures 1,100 square feet. According to Benjamin, it offers 6-star living, with luxurious details like heated marble floors in the bathroom and top-of-the-line finishes throughout. A standout feature of the townhouse is the private backyard garden, which Benjamin describes as a verdant Zen oasis full of eclectic specimens, offering a peaceful retreat from the hustle and bustle of the city. The townhouse was fully renovated by architect Amy Sachs, formerly of Seldorf Architects, blending historic charm with modern updates. Original details like crown moldings and vaulted ceilings have been preserved, while the home's plumbing, wiring, and internet infrastructure have been upgraded. The current owners, who purchased the property for $9.475 million in 2017, are relocating within Manhattan, according to Benjamin. That's a wrap for this video. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to stay updated on future content. We hope you found this story insightful. See you in the next video. Goodbye.